All right, dear friends, good morning, good morning. Welcome to another wonderful Friday morning, learning the beautiful Pirkei Avot, and we are on to chapter 4. This is our fourth class. And chapter 4 stands out specifically as a chapter that is very focused on our relationships with each other, interpersonal relationships. In Hebrew, ben Adam lachavero, between a man and his fellow. And the very opening Mishnah of this week's chapter is a very iconic Mishnah, and it really captures a lot of how Judaism wants us to change the way we look at people, the way we look at ourselves, at ourselves. So let us jump in. Chapter 4. This is the very first Mishnah of this week's chapter. And let us read. And just, by the way, I just want to make mention once again that all the classes I put up online. So if you missed any of the previous classes, you could go on my YouTube channel and you can catch up all the Pirkei Avot, as well as any class that we do on Zoom, which is easy to record. I put up online. Okay, so let us read the Mishnah. And this week's theme is 4 counterintuitive truths. The Mishnah is going to speak about 4 very important areas of life and give us a whole different perspective of how to look at it, which is very not intuitive, perhaps even the opposite of how we would commonly think of these 4 ideas. So let's read. Ben Zoma would say, "Who is wise? One who learns from every person. As it is stated, it's a verse in Psalms, from all my teachers I have grown wise, for your testimonials are my meditation. Who is strong? The person who conquers their own inclinations. As is stated, it's a verse in Proverbs, better one who is slow to anger than one with might, one who rules their spirit than the conqueror of a city. Who is rich? The person who is satisfied with their lot. As is stated, it's a verse in Psalms, if you eat of the toil of your hands, fortunate are you, and good is to you. Fortunate are you in this world, and good is to you in the world to come. Who is honored? The person who honors their fellow creatures. As it is stated, for to those who honor me, I accord honor. Those who scorn me will be demeaned." All right, a little bit of a longer Mishnah than usual. Ben Zoma, the great sage Ben Zoma, speaks about 4 big ideas in life: wisdom, power, wealth, and honor, which in a certain sense, I guess it's fair to say it captures the totality of human pursuits, right? Everybody is running after wisdom, power, wealth, and honor. More or less, that's kind of what people are after. And there's the way that we would usually think about these terms. What makes somebody successful in wisdom? What makes somebody successful in power, in wealth, and in honor? And Ben Zoma teaches us the Torah's perspective on these 4, and they're quite different than common perception. So let us go through it. Number 1 is wisdom. What's wisdom? So the common perception is that who is wise? If you walk into a room and there's a teacher and a student, the person who is speaking is the wise one, and the person who is listening is not as wise. The more you have to learn from somebody else, the less wise you are. The less you have to learn from other people, the more wise you are. That is conventional wisdom. The Torah's model is, that's not the way it is. People think that the more you know, the less you need to learn from other people. The Torah says, no, the opposite. It's specifically a wise person who understands that they have something to learn from everyone. Even if their knowledge is inferior, if someone else's knowledge is inferior to theirs, but you still have to learn from them. That's number 1. Number 2 is power. What's power? The conventional understanding of power is somebody who has the ability to assert control. They're able to control other people. They could impose their will on others. A weak person doesn't have the ability to control or impose upon other people. The strong person is able to impose. Says the Torah, exactly the opposite. Power is not about controlling others. It's about restraining themselves. It's a strength inside to restrain yourself, your own impulses, your own weaknesses. It's exactly the opposite. It's not controlling us, it's controlling yourself. Number 3 is wealth. What's wealth? Wealth is very easy, right? The common perception of wealth is very simple, right? How much do you own? What are you worth? What's your value? And that is a very quantifiable number. And even more so, wealthy people are usually people that we consider as being very ambitious. People with great ambition. If you have great ambition, you work hard and you strategize and you stay up at nights and you don't take it easy and you work very hard, you make a lot of money, that's a wealthy person. The Torah says exactly the opposite. True wealth is somebody who is happy with whatever they have. And it doesn't matter how much or how little they actually possess. It's how happy you are. Number 4 is honor. And honor is basically the result of the previous 3. Who is somebody who is honored? Somebody who has a lot of wisdom, power, and wealth, which are the previous 3 subjects of the Mishnah. Somebody who is very wise gets honor. Somebody who has a lot of power gains honor. Somebody who has achieved wealth gets a lot of honor. And it's only natural that the more somebody has in one of these 3 areas, wisdom, power, and wealth, the more they will gain the honor of the people around them. And the more it is natural for those people to start looking down at people who don't have what they have, who's somebody who is not as wise, somebody who is not as powerful and not as wealthy. Says the Torah's idea of honor is exactly the opposite. Who is an honored person? Somebody who honors everybody else, who respects others, even if they happen to occupy a lower station. They are lower on the totem pole of life. This is the essential, these are the 4 messages that Ben Zoma teaches us. And the real truth is we have to understand it. What is the truth behind all these four statements? They sound very idealistic on paper, but do they actually meet up objectively? Are these really the proper definitions? I'm saying it's very nice for everybody to honor everybody else, but is that truly the honored person? Is wealth really just about being happy with whatever you have? Or, wealth is wealth, we got to be honest. Is wisdom just about, oh yeah, you learn from everybody, but is that really wisdom? So, dear friends, let us go into a little bit more in depth and explore what the commentaries teach us about all these specifics, these 4 specific ideas over here, and gain a little bit of a deeper appreciation. So let us begin with the very first one. Who is wise? By the way, I love how Ben Zoma writes in this poetic form, right? He doesn't question and answer. Who is wise? Who is powerful? Who is wealthy? Who is rich? It's a learning mechanism to introduce the concept with a question. So I enjoy this style. But in any case, the first one, who is wise? The first teaching, one who learns from every person. You got to learn from everybody. One of the commentaries quote the Greek philosophers, which is very interesting because this is a Jewish scholar quoting non-Jewish secular scholars as well. But to bring out this idea, they quote a little bit of Greek philosophy. The Greek philosophers would say that people think that the more knowledge you have, that is the bar for wisdom. The more you know, the more wise you are. Said the philosophers, that's not true. In fact, there are a lot of people who have a lot of wisdom. Sorry, they have a lot of knowledge. They know a lot of info, but they're very stupid. Today we know there are robots who know everything. They have the whole internet in them, but they're essentially stupid. Or there's no wisdom. The Greek philosophers would say wisdom are people who are always curious. If you are curious, that's wisdom. If you understand, if you are searching, if you are looking for truth, that's a wise person. I don't care how much you happen to know or not. It's an attitude in life. So they bring out the idea that it's not just even a Jewish value. Even the wise men, even the wise philosophers understood this truth. And that's very much a Jewish attitude. In Judaism, we don't celebrate the amassment of knowledge. We don't celebrate like, oh, you know so much. Now we consider you wise. Does anybody know the Hebrew term for the word scholar? A great scholar. What is the word for that in Hebrew? Does anybody know? Like a great sage. Anybody know what the Hebrew term would be?
Is it tzaddik?
A tzaddik is a righteous person. So no, that wouldn't be the word. But a scholar, what would be a scholar? Anyone know?
Chacham.
A chacham. But specifically, throughout the Talmud, it's a Talmud chacham. A Talmud chacham. Have you ever heard that? 2 words, Talmud chacham. Any Talmudic sage is called a Talmud chacham. And in the Pirkei Avot, you have the word Talmud chacham or Talmidei chachamim in the plural many, many times. A scholar is referred to as a Talmud chacham. But a Talmud chacham is really 2 words. Talmud means student, and chacham means wise. So in the Jewish language, in Hebrew, the way we refer to a scholar is a student of wisdom or a wise student, which is very interesting. Baked into the very term of somebody who is wise in Judaism is the idea that they are a scholar. And this is one of the beautiful teachings that one of the commentaries, the Midrash Shmuel, points out in his commentary of this Mishnah. And it's such a beautiful idea. Let's read it together in text 2, in the handouts that I emailed to you, text 2, from Rabbi Shmuel di Usida. He says like this: how delectable, that's literally what he says. In the Hebrew, it says, masok midvash. It's sweet as honey. How beautiful is it? How sweet is it? Is this expression that we find in the language of our sages, where a Torah scholar is referred to as a Talmid Chacham. Indeed, one can never separate the word student from the word wise. The moment a person stops thinking of themselves as a student, they can no longer be wise. It's one of the most beautiful ideas in Judaism. A sign of wisdom is the humility to always want to know more, to never think of yourself as having to know everything. And what's the term in English where there's a bias? What's the word again? I'm looking for the word. A confirmation bias. We have a problem in society. It's called confirmation bias. In simple English, it means everybody hears whatever they want to hear. People only hear what they want to hear, which means you're essentially never allowing yourself to learn and grow. You want everything to fit into your box, and you're never willing to say, like, maybe I don't know everything. Maybe whatever I know is not enough. Maybe there's something which can change my entire perspective. And that's a real sign of wisdom, to say, I'm always learning. And even when you know that you're wise, even when you know that you know a lot, you have to always have the humility that I always have more to learn. And there's nothing more beautiful than studying with humility, studying with your eyes open, and allowing yourself to learn more. And it's a very stifling experience when you study, or when you see other people studying, not to be critical of anybody, and you could see that they have this inherent stubbornness to hear anything that doesn't fit whatever they already their preconceived notions. And it's the biggest block before being able to really study and to grow and to mature intellectually. So this is what Ben Zoma says: studying wisdom begins with being willing to learn from everybody. I'm going to shut my ringer. Learn from people who you don't agree with, etc. Okay. Now, that brings us into the next question. If I want to get into the details of it. Okay. Sounds like a wonderful ideal. Again, once again, beautiful idea. Learn from everybody. A wise person learns from everybody, but is that really practical? Am I really supposed to learn from everybody? Like, is everybody literal? I'll put it this way. If I told you that I'm the smartest person on the planet, would you buy that? No. Okay. Good. Okay. Yeah, you probably think I'm a little bit delusional. Okay. But if I told you that I'm the stupidest person on the planet, would you also believe me? No. Okay. So, yeah, we all fall somewhere in between being the smartest person on the planet, being the dumbest person on the planet. Thank God we don't, we're not in either of those extremes. But obviously, there are some people who are a little bit more stupid and more ignorant than us. So what do we have to learn from them? Right? Like, I need to learn from you. Like, so if you want to think about it objectively, like, Benzoma, is this real? Like, everybody learned from? It doesn't make sense to everybody. And then there's also the question, what about bad people? What about evil people? What about immoral people? Are we supposed to learn from bad people? This becomes more of a, when you break it down to the details, it starts getting a little bit more iffy. Really learn from everybody? So I want to teach you two answers to this idea. And Judaism says, yes, we learn from everybody. Now, how can we learn from everybody? Again, is everybody worthy of learning from? Is everybody smart? Does everybody have more wisdom than me that I can gain wisdom from them? And even evil people and even immoral people, what if I see somebody doing something bad? I know something's bad, I should learn from them. So this takes us into an even deeper level of this teaching. When Judaism says learn from everybody, the reason for that is because we believe in Judaism in divine providence. Divine providence means God runs the world. And you will not see anything that God doesn't want you to see. And for that reason, everything is a teachable moment, especially the people that we come into contact with. Nothing is incidental. Nothing is by chance. Nothing is just, okay, I happen to see this. I happen to know this just because. The Hebrew term is hashgacha pratis, divine providence. There's a beautiful, beautiful story about one of the greatest sages who ever lived. His name was Rashi. Right? Who didn't hear about Rashi? You can't study the Torah without Rashi. You can't study the Talmud without Rashi. Like, Rashi is literally the OG of Jewish study. Without Rashi, Jewish text would be a closed book for us. Rashi lived about 1,000 years ago in France. And Rashi once happened to see a noble woman, which means she was part of the nobility, riding a horse, and she wasn't dressed modestly. And Maimonides Rashi, his full name is Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki. Right, that's Rashi. Rashi is the acronym of his name, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki. Rabbi Shlomo, the son of Yitzchak. And he was very bothered. Why would God make me see this improper scene? Why would God want me to see something immodest? And he was legitimately bothered by it. Why would God put me in such a position that I had to see that? Now, between me and you, it wasn't like she was it wasn't like she was dressed too provocatively, but it was simply immodest. And Rashi was bothered. Why did I even have to see that? Rashi writes this in his commentary, that because he saw the way the special clothing that the noble woman would wear, it helped him understand the description of one of the clothing that the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, is commanded to wear in the Holy Temple. And only because he saw this woman was he able to properly understand what this garment was. And he was able to describe it in his commentary. And he says, that's when I understood why God wanted me to see that. And it's such an amazing attitude. Like, we see things all the time. Do we stop and think, like, why did I just see that? It's a very interesting way of living life. And Rashi writes this down. And the lesson is, everything is there for a reason. We're meant to learn from everything. So let's think about it this way. Somebody is doing something immoral, and we happen to see it. We happen to learn about it. Well, not everybody heard about this, but we learned about it. So what are we supposed to learn from it? There's something to learn. Ben Zoma said there's something to learn. So number one, the first approach is we can at least learn what not to do. I guess, on the most elementary level, you learn, you see something inappropriate. Now you at least know what not to do. And it's even a little bit deeper than that. Let's read this next text, which quotes from the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. And this is a very, very interesting idea, very interesting point here. Text 3. The Baal Shem Tov taught that the truly righteous person does not perceive anything bad in another person. One who does see the bad in others, this is like one who looks into a mirror. If your own face is dirty, that's what you see in the mirror. If your face is clean, what you see in the mirror is also flawless. The way that you are, that's what you see. It's a heavy statement. In the Yiddish, we say the other person is your mirror. It's a very big truth. We perceive the world from a very subjective place. We understand what is happening around us because we could relate to it. So, for example, we relate very well, pretty much to the life of animals. We kind of get them. They look somewhat similar to us. They have 2 eyes, they have a mouth. So therefore, we can make nature documentaries about animals. And what's his name? David Attenborough. What's his name? Am I getting his name right? Right. The BBC makes these nature documentaries, and they and they use very human terminology to describe the lives of animals. We are always projecting our experience onto others. When we see somebody else being not nice, we know what not nice is because we are not nice, or we know what not niceness is within ourselves. So then, therefore, we can perceive and we project what the other person is doing because we could relate to it. We happen to not really relate to the life of trees. We know that trees are alive. There's some form of life, but we just really don't relate to it because we don't have the resources to be able to project our life onto the life of a tree. So we just don't get it. And this is a very big truth about life. We project ourselves onto others. We see everybody through the prisms of our own lives. So if we see bad in somebody else, you know what that means? We can only see the bad in somebody else because we have it ourselves. If we didn't even possess that bad, we would be totally ignorant of the existence of that bad. So we wouldn't even see it. So the Baal Shem Tov teaches a very sobering thought. When you see something bad in somebody else, you should know the only reason why you're even able to see it is because you possess that negativity within yourself. And therefore, the fact you saw it is a lesson to yourself. I also possess some of this negativity. Maybe not to that extreme, but at least in a subtle way, I possess the negativity. And sometimes we only really realize how bad something is when we see somebody else doing it. So it's a good wake-up call. So we can learn from somebody else. When we see something negative in somebody else, that itself is an indicator we have that. We have that same weakness, even on a subtle level, albeit on a subtle level. And therefore, when we witness that from somebody else, it's a message from God. We also need to rectify that area in our own lives as well. Yes, Marshall.
So by this definition, a tzaddik should see no bad because he has no bad. So tzaddik is walking down the street and he sees a father beating his child on the street. He looks at it and says, oh, okay. Because he doesn't see the bad.
That's a very good question. That is a very good question. Practically speaking, how does a tzaddik see the world? Like the tzaddik can't really, there's no way a tzaddik is like naive to think that everybody is doing good. Right. So I guess what it means is that they see the bad, but from a purely objective place. But they can't really relate to it. They don't see bad the same way we do. It's a very different type of experience. But I'm not sure. I guess if I was a tzaddik, I would know a little bit better how to explain that. But No, but it doesn't mean that they're naive. That, like, your example, they see somebody hurting somebody else. They're like, they don't think that's like going out fishing or something. They are, but they're essentially detached from it. But that's a very good question, Marshall. Practically speaking, what's their experience like? I don't know. I wonder if anywhere that's explained. I'll have to look that up. Gail, yes.
Okay, this is sort of on the same lines. If God forbid you saw like all these shootings that are going on and you witnessed something like that and you're horrified, does that mean that you have that ability in you that you could kill somebody?
Yeah, it essentially does. Now, again, not to the same degree, but even on a very subtle level, if you see any negativity in anybody else, it means that you possess at least a trace of that negativity as well. And that is an indicator there's what for you to learn from as well from that, to avoid that. And I'll just tell you very practically, Gail. I know that we love going to the extreme cases, but what this basically means is, and this goes back to something we learned in a previous class, we are so biased for ourselves that we sometimes don't even properly perceive our own negativity. And we internally cover up our own negativity. We don't take it seriously. And sometimes God makes us see somebody else doing something that we maybe do as well, or something that we do, but even more subtly than them. But a little bit we have that. And when we get very upset and disgusted with what they're doing, sometimes it helps us realize that 1 second, maybe I'm a little bit guilty of that as well. Maybe I have to be a little bit more careful as well in this area of my life as well. So it's a little bit of a sobering wake-up call. Does that make sense? Okay, but the second approach is even deeper, and it's very beautiful. So the first idea is you learn what not to do. We can learn from somebody else's negativity, because the moment we see negativity, it's only because we could relate to that negativity. And therefore, that's a lesson for us that we also need to be better in that area. But going even further, dear friends, there's even something positive we can learn. When we see something negative in somebody else, there is something positive to learn. You see, because behind every single bad nature, behind every single bad behavior, if you strip away the negativity from that behavior or from that emotion or from that trait, there's actually something very positive there. Is ambition good or bad? Ambition is neutral. Sometimes you'll see somebody who is overly ambitious in an unhealthy way. But essentially, ambition could be used for so much good. So sometimes when we see somebody using their human power, their human resources for negativity, we can learn from them how we could use that same force for the good. And this is a beautiful Hasidic teaching, which the Rebbe published, one of the Rebbe's very first publishing projects when he came to America in 1941, was a daily journal for the Chabad community, where he chose a short, small Hasidic nugget for every single day of the year. So it's a little pamphlet with 365 entries, one beautiful Jewish teaching, a Hasidic teaching, an inspiring teaching for that day. And the Rebbe put this in for one of the days. And this captures the message over here that we can learn from everybody, even somebody who's doing something negative. Let's read text 4. Every character trait, including traits that are negative or even bad, according to their names and descriptions, can be utilized to serve God in accordance with the Torah. Thus, the tzaddik, Rabbi Zusha of Anipoli, said that he learned 7 things from a thief. Can you imagine learning something from a thief? But this great Hasidic writer said, I can learn 7 things from a thief. Number 1, he is discreet. Number 2, he is willing to take risks to achieve his goal. 3, he is meticulously careful with all the particulars of his operation, regardless of whether it's a major component or a small detail. Number 4, he invests great effort in what he does. 5, he is swift. 6, he is optimistic. 7, if he fails the first time, he keeps coming back for another try. So that's such a sweet teaching, no? You look at a thief, this guy's horrible. He's robbing people. He's a potential murderer. Either he has murdered or he will murder. That's what Jewish law says. A thief is considered a potential murderer because he will even use murder to get out of trouble if he's caught. That's the halachic definition of a thief. That's what Jewish law, the Talmud says that. Are you allowed to murder a thief? Question of self-defense. So I don't know what American law says, but according to Jewish law, if somebody breaks into your house, you're allowed to shoot them. Why? Because a thief is a potential murderer. If he's breaking into your home, he's willing to kill you. Okay, so in any case, so this guy is not really the cream of the crop of society over here. You know, we're talking about a thief over here. And Rabbi Yisrael says, I can learn 7 traits that I can borrow from a thief in my divine service, in my service of Hashem. 7 beautiful traits. And this idea that even when we see something negative in somebody, we can say, you know, I could learn from that person. Yeah, he uses these traits in a negative way, but if I would use them in a positive way, I would be such an amazing person. Yes, Marshall.
So is that like saying Hitler was a monster, but he was very good?
Oh, I was ready for this question.
But he's very good at what he did, but he's a monster.
You know, everything becomes very extreme when we go to extremes. And sometimes when we run to extremes, we allow extreme examples to take away from the power of these teachings. So yeah, it always, of course, gets a lot more provocative if we'll be talking about Hitler. But let's just talk about, you know, the other guy who got caught for this crime or that crime, or he's a not nice person, or I remember hearing this beautiful thought after 9/11. Okay. 9/11 changed the world. You know, it's pretty scary that college kids today are, were born after 9/11. It's like, still shocks me. Because for me, 9/11 is like, current history. It's not like, but it's already been history. Okay. But in any case, 9/11 changed the world in the most dramatic way. You know, probably one of the most earth-shattering changes in decades. But how many people did it? How many people did it? Not that many people. 11, 12, 13. I'm saying it was less than, I think it was 9. I think it was 9 hijackers. So all in all, even with all the planners, I'm saying how many people got together, and just because they put in very focused effort and energy, they were so determined that they changed the world. But they changed the world for evil. They changed the world for bad. So what if we could take 9 of us and really put our minds and hearts to it, to try to change the world, but for the better? And the Torah promises us that the power of goodness is stronger than the power of evil. So if 9 people are able to change the world drastically, dramatically for the evil, how much more so could 9 of us change the world for good? Now, is that praising the hijackers? No, but it's taking a lesson. It's we're learning something from them. And like, wow, that's showing us a truth. 9 people could change the world in 1 hour. Could we do that? It's a very powerful idea. It's a scary idea. If we could do it, why aren't we doing it? They did it. Why haven't we done it in the 20 years since? With just a few months of planning, we can't change the world? Maybe we could. The Torah says we definitely could. Okay. So there's definitely what to learn from everybody. Okay, dear friends, let's keep on going. We don't have that much time left, actually. So I guess we're focusing mostly on today's class on the idea of wisdom, but let's at least get a few little vignettes in for the next 3 ideas. Power. What's power? Ben Zoma says, who is strong? The person who conquers their own inclinations. There's a story about the great Alexander, the great conqueror Alexander. And Alexander was the greatest conqueror who ever lived, right? The King Alexander. And the story goes that once King Alexander came home one evening, came back to his tent after a long day at battle, and he asked for food. He was starving. He didn't eat the whole day. The whole day he's out there in the heat and fighting and battling. And his adrenaline is rushed. And he comes there, and his chef puts in front of him a bowl of soup. And in the bowl of soup, floating right there is like a little fly, a little dead mosquito. And Alexander the Great blows up in a rage. I'm out a whole day. I'm starving. I'm Alexander the Great. And you give me a bowl of soup with it? And he literally loses it. He loses it. And this chef turns to Alexander and says, Alexander the Great, you're such a great conqueror. Nobody could stand in your way. But you can't even conquer. You can't even control your anger. That's the story. Now, I'm sure those were the very last words that this chef ever said. But there's a certain truth to that. Sometimes people who are so powerful, they have so much power, physical power, the power of influence. When it comes to just our own little weaknesses, our pride, our anger, they have no control, which means they could control everything but themselves. So Ben Zoma says, the person who is truly powerful is the person who controls himself, because at the end of the day, we don't control really anything other than ourselves, right? Like the serenity prayer. Most things outside of us, we don't control. Actually, everything outside of us, we don't control. The only thing we really have control over is ourselves. And our instincts are unbelievably powerful. All of life, all of our ambition comes from our internal traits. But sometimes they get the better of us, and it becomes a very difficult struggle to control them. Especially anger. These are things that it takes a lot of self-control and a lot of internal work to be in control of our anger. And it doesn't work to control anger only when we get angry. We have to work on being in a place of control for before we get angry. Once you're angry, the cat's out of the hat. It's over. That takes a lot of effort. So one little thought I want to share with you. Ben Zoma, for each of these four teachings, quotes a verse. And for this verse, Ben Zoma says, who is strong? The person who conquers their own inclinations. And he gives a verse. As it is stated in Proverbs, better one who is slow to anger than one with might. One who rules their spirit than the conqueror of a city. So the commentaries say, what's this idea that we are comparing somebody who is able to control themselves with somebody who conquers a city? What's the meaning of this correlation? And the commentary says something so beautiful. They say it's a very significant comparison. A true conqueror doesn't destroy the city. Because if you destroy the city, you technically won the war, but you got no city left. It's like Russia's doing in Ukraine, carpet bomb the whole place, but you got nothing left after that, A true conqueror doesn't destroy the city. It's not productive. You want your city to be a part of your empire. If you destroy it, all you got is barren land. So a true conqueror has to use a lot more wisdom. Yeah, it's easy to just go and blow up the whole place. A true conqueror has to find a way to get into the city. Don't damage the city. And help to get the inhabitants of the city to persuade the inhabitants to become your subjects. Of course, you could kill everybody, but then you have no subjects left. And our sages say that's the exact same way we have to conquer our evil inclination. We don't destroy it. We simply have to persuade it. We have to refocus it. So if we have certain negative character traits, every negative character trait could be used for the good. This goes back to the teaching from before, right? Everything could be used for the positive. There's very little that is inherently evil. Even pride. Pride and arrogance is bad. But you could use your arrogance to keep you away from doing something negative. There's such a story. There's a story, a Hasidic story of a Chassid of the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya. And the Chassid said that he always had a weakness, that he had a lot of pride, he had a lot of arrogance, he had a big ego. But then he learned Chassidus, and he learned that he could use his pride as a way to stop him from sinning. That whenever he faced a temptation, he would tell himself, I'm a chassid of the Alter Rebbe. This is totally inappropriate for me. This is below my dignity. And that was how he was always able to convince himself not to do it. So even pride, any negative character trait, is something that we could conquer. Don't destroy. If you have something that's powerful, that is even driving you to do something negative, that force could be used for the positive. And the beautiful idea is over here that we have to conquer ourselves, not destroy ourselves. Even our weaknesses, the weakness is only the manifestation of that force. But we could use that force and manifest it in a good way. Okay. Let's conclude with a little bit about wealth. Who is rich? Who is wealthy? The person who is satisfied with their lot. Let's conclude with this idea. There is a very uncomfortable truth about money, which is nobody ever has enough. And this has been very strongly proven by the neurological science, by psychology. There is something called the treadmill effect in psychology. The treadmill effect is that no matter how much you gain, you always stay exactly where you are. Which that's what a treadmill is. You're essentially running, but you're always staying in the same place. And that's also when it comes to pleasures and enjoyment in this world. We tend to think, if I only was able to afford that, I would be happy. But what happens is we start running towards that. Let's say we even get it, and we discover we're exactly at the same place. Now there's a new thing that we're running after. And in English, this is called the rat race. I don't know where that thing comes from, but rats and rodents are always running around, they're always grabbing things. For what? For when? They're so busy. And life becomes a rat race. And Judaism says this, that essentially, no matter how wealthy you are, if your attitude is that you want to amass wealth, you are never going to get to a place that you are satisfied with what you have before you die. Impossible. Let's read these two texts here together. Text 8. All right, moving on to text 8, skipping a little bit. Text 8, straight from the Midrash from our sages. A person does not depart from this world having achieved half of his desires. I'm saying that's a crazy statement. Think about whatever you wish you could have. You will never die even getting half. If they have 100 zuz, like $100, they want to make them into 200. If they have 200, they want to make them into 400. No one's ever really happy. That's the rat race. That's the nature of the human being. There's never enough. You buy a big house, and all of a sudden you realize, I want a bigger house. You buy one car, I want 2 cars. You got 2 cars, and I want a boat, a private plane. I'm saying the sky's the limits in today's world. So you see this, no matter how wealthy somebody is, they're never content. This is the next text. Let's do the next text, text 9, the Jerusalem Talmud. Why are all the inhabitants of the world compared to rodents? This is interesting. The rat race is a very recent term. I don't know, 100 years old at most. And the Talmud, close to 2,000 years ago, is saying this. The people of the world are compared to rodents. As the rodents scurries about in hordes, not knowing for what purpose it hoards, so do all the inhabitants of the world scurry and hoard, without knowing for what they are hoarding. And this is a very big truth about life. Ben Zoma is saying, if you want to judge wealth by how much you have, I've got news for you. You will always look at yourself as not having enough. Healthy living is saying, whatever God gave me, whatever Hashem has in store for me, that is my wealth. If Hashem gives me a lot of money, that means that Hashem gave me these opportunities. If Hashem didn't give me as much money, you know what? There are a lot of blessings about not having so much money. Life is simpler when you don't have as much money. Each one's a blessing. Everything's a blessing. The only question is, how do you view it? And then the final teaching of the Mishnah was about honor, about honoring everybody. we'll have to say that for another class. But dear friends, I just want to conclude today with a short little story. I always like concluding with a little story. We learned 3 ideas. A wise person learns from everybody. Power is about controlling ourselves. Wealth is about being happy with what we have. And honor is about honoring everybody, seeing goodness in everybody, learning from everybody. So I want to conclude with a story which is very much about the idea of seeing the goodness in everybody. There's a very big theme of the Mishnah. 2 of the themes, learning from everybody, giving honor to everybody, not seeing the guilt, but seeing the goodness in everybody. So there's a little story, a beautiful Hasidic story about the great Hasidic Rebbe. His name was Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev. He was a rabbi in the town of Berdichev. He was a contemporary of the Alter Rebbe, just to give you a little bit of it. So he lived over 200 years ago in the late 1700s. He was a dear, dear friend of the Alter Rebbe. He says he's my soul partner. He's a soul friend. That's how he refers to him. And he was a Jew who was filled with love. He was a very emotional Jew. He loved the Jewish people. He was always so full of emotion. And there was once they were doing the morning prayers in the town of Berdichev in his shul. And one of the Jews in his talis and in his tefillin was in a rush. He was a wagon driver. And he was a rush to go on his next little to get to work that day. So in the middle of praying, he goes out to his carriage and starts wheeling and starts greasing the wheels because he wants to save time. So everybody started looking at this guy and that's totally inappropriate. You're in the middle of praying and you're getting down on your knees and getting your hands all black. You're greasing the wheels. And people started murmuring critically about this guy. Oh, look at this guy. He's going out in the middle of davening. So Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev turns around and he turns up, he says, God, look at your people, Israel. Even when they grease their wheels, they're praying to you. So it's all a matter of perspective, huh? What do you want to look at it? This guy, he's praying, he's not really praying. Or you could say, no, even when he's greasing his wheels, this guy didn't have to show up to shul today. He was in a rush. But no one would know if he didn't show up. He showed up. He's praying. So it's all a spin. It's all the way you look at it. Could you learn from everybody? Could you see the goodness in everybody? Could you find a reason to honor everybody? And dear friends, it's 11:50, so we're going to conclude for today. This mission has a lot more to study about and learn about. Very, very powerful Mishnah. But that's for now. And I want to wish you all a wonderful Shabbos. And dear friends, this Shabbos is chapter 4 of Pirkei Avos. I want to encourage you to study it. And with that, I want to wish you all a wonderful Shabbos. Thank you for joining. We'll see you all next week, God willing.